Welcome to Rambam In-Depth. We're going to be discussing a halacha in Hilchos Mikvaos, the first chapter, and this is halacha Zayin. The Rambam writes as follows: Kol ha-tevel tzarich sheyitvel kol gufay kshehu arum bebasachas. Anyone who immerses himself in the mikveh has to immerse the entire body undressed, all at once. And if you didn't do it all at once, obviously, then it's not a valid immersion. The Tiferes Yisrael, one of the classic commentators of the Mishnah, asks a question, very obvious question. This halacha that you have to tevel the whole body at once, also, you would think, applies to immersing a Keili, a vessel, a utensil. Yet, the Rambam doesn't mention that. It seems from the Rambam that it only applies to the body, but not to utensils, not to vessels. So why not? What's the difference? So there's a sefer called Gulas Ilyais from a chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek on the whole subject of Mikvaos, on the Masechta Mikvaos and Hilchos Mikvaos. So he says the following, but he prefaces it with a halacha that's mentioned in the Mishnah, and the Rambam rules as that halacha. A mita, a bed, that becomes tamei, and you want to tevel it, you want to immerse it. And you immerse it in a mikveh, and there's mud in the bottom of it. So even though when you put the water in the mikveh, it's in the mud, but because the water was there first, the legs of the bed were moistened by the water, it's considered a valid tevilah. And this is very strange. This is problematic. As the Gulas Ilyas asks, and he quotes the Tosfos Yontiv who asked the question, that you're not immersing the whole Keili at once. You're immersing the legs. That goes into the water before it hits the mud. But when you're immersing the legs, the rest of the bed is out of the mikveh. And then when the legs end up in the mud, and the rest of the bed is in the water, it's only the rest of the bed. The legs are not in the water anymore, they're in the mud. So there are Rishonim who seem to learn that even when it's in the mud, there's still water there, and that water is connected to the water above. So the whole mikveh, the whole bed rather, is immersed in the water of the mikveh, because all the water is connected. But from the Rambam, it seems that he doesn't learn that way. The Rambam in Perek Shmini of Hilchos Mikvaos talks about this case, hitbul bayas hamita, you immerse the bed, apal pisha dacha kragle hamita betit ava shebekarka hamikvah, even though you press the legs of the bed in thick mud at the bottom of the mikvah, achetzofa hamayim alem l'mayla, and the water floats above it, harizet tahira, it's tahar. Why? Because it didn't go into the mud before it hit the water, before it was immersed in water. In other words, it has nothing to do with the fact that there's still water on the legs of the bed and the water is connected. It has to do with the fact that you already teveled half of the Keili, and now you're teveling the rest of the Keili, of the bed. So the question is, how could that be? It's not being immersed all at the same time. So the Gulas Ilyas is mechadish that minatera, the whole din that it has to be bebasachas, is derived from a pasuk where it talks about uba hashemesh, the sun sets and he becomes tahar. Just like the sun sets all at once, in other words, when the sun sets, the whole sun has set. The same thing, the water of the mikveh has to be all at once. This is mentioned in relation to the impurity of a person, but not with regard to a Keili, not to a vessel. Only with the Rabbanan said that a vessel should also be immersed all at once. But Minatorah, it doesn't need to. What's the logic behind that? So the Gulas Ilyas says as follows. He says, when we're talking about a person, Ruach HaChayim asher b'kirbei kosher kuloi ka'achas b'teich kol shetach haguf. The spirit of life that's in the person is all connected. It's in the body. Vein b'tara l'chatzayim. You can't purify a half a person because the person is not just made up of different parts that come together. Person is one organic entity, and therefore that whole organic entity has to be in the mikveh. Masha'enkin b'Keili she'en be'ruach chayim. Keili has no life in him. So kol chelik mimena mefuzah b'fnei atzmai. Every part of the Keili stands by itself. V'yachelel hitar l'chatzayin. And it can be purified even half of a Keili at a time. So, but then the rabbis, with the Rabbanan, they said you should do the whole Keili at once. They made a gzeira because people will think if you can do a Keili one portion and then another portion, they'll think you can do the same with a body. That's why the Chachamim said, no, the whole Keili has to be in the mikveh. However, when it comes to the bed that is placed in the mikveh, nobody sees that the legs of the bed are embedded in the mud and it's not being immersed all at once. Since no one sees it, the Rabbanan did not feel a need to impose their decree and say that you can't fulfill the requirement of tefillah just piecemeal. You have to do it all at once. There's no need for that gzeira there because no one sees that it's not being immersed all at once. No one sees the mud there. But minat Torah, you don't even need to table the whole Keili at once. That's why the Rambam in Perek Aleph at Hilchos Mikvaos says kol ha-tevel. And when he's talking about a person, he has to be tevel the whole body. That's a halacha specifically for a person, not for a Keili.